What gets measured gets managed. Think about that. You do that in several aspects of your life, in your finances, with your budgeting, or at work. Maybe you're tracking KPIs. Well, whatever you're tracking gets managed. It changes. No more is that more evident in our training than, believe it or not, with our jump training. We're continuing our series on the best exercises for athletes and our plyometrics by going deeper into jump training and talking about the jumps that we measure and why today on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personal Edge Fitness, your host today, and I appreciate you joining us to continue our talk about plyometrics and the different jumps we use in training and using plyometrics in our sport training here at Personal Edge Fitness. My guests today are, as always, our exercise coordinator, Charlie Merlot. On my right here and on my left, Katie Carey, one of our client coordinators, talking about this topic. All right, I want to dive headfirst into it, but let everybody know how to get in touch with the show if they have any questions. You can give us a call at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach us at Garrett@personaledgefitness.com. And personaledgefitness.com, of course, is our website, our Facebook page. Hit us up on Twitter, or as it's known now, X, at Team PE. We'd love to hear from you. Now, diving into this, we talked about plyometrics. We started this actually a few weeks ago, and talking about how important plyometrics was. This is actually a continuous series that we've been doing on the type of training that we do and type of exercises we use for training athletes. We dove headfirst into plyometrics because when you say plyometrics, you say a lot. We talked a little bit about jumping a couple weeks ago, but we're getting more in depth. Why do we measure the jumps?
Yeah, so like you already said, we already gave a baseline idea of what plyometrics is, and then some example exercises for that. But really and truly, why do we test and track jumps? The reason behind what I always say is what gets measured gets managed. And
absolutely.
The idea, it's like, all right, if you're tracking something, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're not measuring that, then you're not going to manage it. And it goes the same thing with your finances, all aspects of life. Whatever gets measured gets managed. And so for us, as we're dealing with an athlete's program, if we're just blindly plugging and playing exercises and there's no method to the madness of what we're doing, then how do we really know if the athlete's making any improvements, right? And so I think that's something that we do very well at Personal Edge, and catering and individualizing programs for our athletes is using this jump tracking method, because it helps us be able to individualize the program, be able to modify which direction we want to go with the program depending on that specific athlete's goals.
You also do that with general clientele, as far as we do a little bit of that. Think about when you're doing plyo box jumps with one of our clients. I want to mention his names, but I won't mention his name. But one of our clients, and tracking there, I mean, the difference it makes in their program.
Right, of course.
They typically will care if we go from a 12-inch box to an 8-inch box to a 24-inch box to make sense. But it's a little more technical in the plyometric training for sport and jump training there. Now, Katie, with your background with basketball at SUNY, this is something that y'all used a lot.
Right, we definitely did. I was just telling Charlie a little bit before this, we used to have these awesome 5 a.m. workouts where we would just work on our plyometrics. We did a bunch of different conditioning drills, a bunch of different speed, agility, and jump testing at 5 a.m. It was awful.
I was about to stop you and say that, it's truly a sick individual that says it was a fun 5 a.m. workout. So, I mean, even as trainers, we know that takes you a little bit off there. But yeah, that's something y'all did measure and you did track.
We would work on it in the morning, and then we had a weight room session later that afternoon where we would actually go in and measure that kind of stuff. So we had a jump mat, and when you jumped off of it to measure your vertical, it used a timing-based system to tell you how much your vertical was. Right. And then we recorded that, and like Charlie's doing our tracking here for our athletes, it would be put up on the TV. So we were trying to compete not only against our score from last week, but against our teammates. Like, who can jump the highest on the team? I mean, that's a big deal. Like,
well, like you were saying, what gets measured gets managed. That's no different than our whiteboard workout here in the leaderboard.
Right.
We have the whiteboard workout. That has changed everything, tracking that. So, but it's interesting how it relates to sport. Of course, you're talking a lot about, of course, vertical jumping. I mean, it's basketball.
Right.
That timer mat, how much time you're you're away from the mat, and land gives you the higher the number, of course, the higher the jump. So, but that's not the only jumps that we work on here, right?
No, of course not. We track 5 different jumps with our athletes, and there's a method to the madness. There's a reason behind why we track each individual jump. And so each jump measures a different quality that we're trying to train in an athlete. Sure. We modify that athlete's program based off of, the improvements or the lack of improvement that they're making in those specific areas. So just to break down those 5, we got the first one's the broad jump. We've covered that, and that is going to measure horizontal power. Like we already said, the broad jump is a good indicator of an acceleration-based plyometric, and so that's going to carry over to sprinting, and that's a main quality that you're looking for in an athlete, right?
Of course.
To sprint.
And actually, I think that's one that I hate that one's was downgraded for many years. I mean, and I don't know if y'all know this. It used to be in the Olympics.
Really?
The standing broad jump was in the Olympics. Yeah, it was an Olympic event, and then it just got discounted. And I'm so glad to see it have its resurgence. We realize that we do that too many times. We forget about an exercise or stop using it and go, wait a second. There was a reason why we were using that. So effective, like you're telling, for sprinting and what have you. So
yeah, so that's the first one that gets tested. The next one is the counter movement jump. And so we test these two together. It's the counter movement jump and then the squat jump. We do those back to back. The counter movement jump is more of a test that's going to test lower body vertical power.
Okay.
So with that, think of a normal vertical jump. You're standing upright and then you sink down fast and you jump up. And then what we use here, Katie and them had the jump mat, which is it's a really cool piece of technology. We have a Vertec, which is also great. You probably see it in NFL Combine, things like that, where you jump up and you hit the little plastic tabs, and it measures your jump height. And so for us, first one we do is the counter movement jump, where you jump down, you swing down fast, and you jump up and hit it. And so you have that counter movement where you're using momentum to jump up and hit the plastic tabs. So the next one is the squat jump, where instead of swinging down where you would in the counter movement, you go down to the bottom of a squat, and then you jump straight from that bottom position.
Okay.
So you're taking the momentum out of it. So there is no counter movement. And so what you see is you typically see about a 2 to 4 inch difference in the squat jump from the counter movement jump. It's usually a little less because you're not using that momentum. And the squat jump is more of a lower body explosive strength plyometric versus power. And so that's where those two kind of vary. So they tell us different things, whether one athlete who might have a higher counter movement jump, they might be more twitchy, as we've already said.
Okay.
And so that means they might need more strength in their program, more strength-based
Now
focus.
break those down again, though. You're talking about those two different jumps, because you're talking about one of them being your basic like full start standing up.
Yeah, standing up.
Squat down, jump, and jump.
Yep.
It's one continuous movement. But the second jump you were saying is basically starting from a squat position. I mean,
so you're starting from the bottom of the squat, and then you go straight up, trying not to move any from that bottom of the squat. So we're not looking for any kind of dip and then back up from that dead stop position straight up. And so there's no counter movement.
Just basically stay from a standstill to explosion.
Right. And so, you see that in sport, right? I mean, you think about an offensive lineman who's in his stance, he's shooting straight out of that dead still position into, to make a block.
Right.
You see that a lot in sport, where you go from a dead stop into an explosive reaction. And so
actually, you see
trying
that
to mimic that.
Yeah, you see that in your sport, believe it or not. You see that in a rebound.
Right.
I mean, the ball's gone up, and you don't know it's going to bounce around the rim, whatever it's going to come down.
You're just kind of standing there waiting.
Exactly, in that squat position.
But that's how one of the ways we modify and individualize programs is, depending on, how one individual performs in each of those two jumps, we know, okay, does this person need more strength? Do they need more power focus in their program? And so that's one of the ways that we look at it. And so
that will actually shape the exercises that you use in addition to the jumps that you're doing.
Right. And so, in the programming through exercises, that's how we kind of determine what they need for that specific athlete. And so the next one would be a lateral bound. So we talked about lateral movement is very important, and that's going to translate into, okay, how well can this specific athlete change direction?
Right.
How efficient are they in making a cut? And so that gives us some good insight into, how well can they perform that movement. And the last one is a single leg hop and stick. So it's essentially a single leg broad jump.
Right.
So you're jumping off of one foot, and then you're landing on the same foot.
Okay.
And this exercise is really cool. Not a lot of people probably do it, but it's good for testing single leg lower body power, obviously.
Right.
So you're testing pushing off of one foot, which we know, anytime you're walking, any kind of locomotion is you're spending a lot of time on one foot to the next. And so it's an important thing to test. But also what's interesting, there's a lot of research that shows that jumping off of one foot and landing on the next and be able to stick that landing shows a lot of positive support behind preventing lower body injury, because you're landing on that same foot. There's a lot
ankle
of force
stability and
down.
whatever. Right.
So the correlation between being able to stick that landing on that one foot and decreasing the likelihood of injury is actually very well. And so that's one reason we track it.
This jump resembles like a triple jump.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, basically,
like
So the first movement or so in the triple jump is that way, taking off one, landing the other. And I can see where if you're taking off of one foot and landing on the same foot, the stability that you get there. But I want to go back a little bit to the lateral jumps that you're talking about. That is so valuable to me. My thing is seniors. I love working with seniors, and we don't, they don't do sideways movement. But I can imagine when you were playing how important lateral movement, lateral jumps were. So.
Oh my goodness, you have no idea. No, but seriously, you want to talk about ankle injury prevention? Lateral bounds were huge for us. I mean, there's so many times in basketball. I mean, all sports really that you're cutting and changing direction. But with basketball, that's the name of the game. How can you outcut your opponent? So,
There's so many times I think about that. I think about that in basketball. I think about it in baseball, and I think about it in soccer. Really, basketball and soccer. And basketball, I always felt that as far as your 40 speed wasn't half as important as that what I call first step quickness.
Right. Exactly.
And lateral quickness the same way. Soccer. Think about it. If you can tap the ball and move sideways just this much faster than your next person, you're going to stay a step ahead. That's the same thing that you see in your sport. So.
Right. And another sport that we don't really think about, it may not be as popular down here, but ice hockey is huge in upstate New York. Ice hockey, field hockey, any of those hockey sports, lateral movements are, again, huge.
Look, I'm sure.
And, we have several lacrosse players that train here, and so – being from Mississippi, we didn't have lacrosse. When I came to a bill and I heard about all these lacrosse players,
wait a second. I thought Mississippi was like the lacrosse mecca.
You would think so, right? I mean, we got a ton of lacrosse fans in Mississippi.
I wouldn't doubt it.
But it was super interesting. So I was like, "Wait, you play lacrosse?" And they were like, "Yeah, I mean, we got a team here in Mobile." And I was like, "Oh wow!" So I had to do some research. Okay, what does a lacrosse player need in their training? And so it was really cool for me, a learning experience, to be able to understand that sport some more.
Right.
I mean, like Katie said, I mean, lateral cutting, lateral bounds, it definitely pays off because you're doing that all the time in the sport.
Right.
Yeah. And then, but back to the other one you were talking about. I've seen y'all do those. I've seen y'all do that. I've forgotten what you call it now. The single leg hop.
Single leg hop and stick. Yeah.
Single leg hop and stick. I've seen you do that out here, and that must perplex some of your athletes the first time you do that. That's got
it does.
Yeah,
they want to land on the other foot. I'm like, no, you got to land on the same foot. And they're like, okay, I got to think about this for a second.
Yeah.
And the stick gets them.
Yeah. Because we'll tell them, look, if you don't stick it, you got to jump again, because we got to measure from the back of your heel. So if you don't stick it, it doesn't count. And so, we'll end up doing it a couple times just because the first few tries, they're like, all right, you got to give me a second. So.
I mean, I know they've got to be thinking, you've got a Mary Lou Rhett and Nadia Comaneci, something or other going on here. So, I would guess our pole vaulter, one of our pole vaulters that comes in that is a tremendous gymnast, probably wouldn't have too much trouble with it.
I don't think, not at all.
There's some that are more comfortable with those types of movements than others. They're more used to being able to land on one foot like that. And so, some of it's a learning curve, but they start to see the carryover, as they get the hang of it, and as they see them progress, month to month, they're like, wow, like I've gained 5 inches on my broad jump or my single leg hop and stick. And, from there, it creates great buy-in, right? Because you're seeing that results. You're seeing like, oh, wow, like I'm making progress.
Right.
This is going to carry over into my sport. And so I think that's something that's been really cool for us to be able to show our athletes. It's like, hey, like this is how we're helping you.
I want to speak about that motivation in just a second, because that's something we talk about a lot with our parents when they come with their athletes, and that is that we want the buy-in. It's fantastic when mom or dad are all psyched up about this, but the athlete has to be psyched about it. And a lot of times the buy-in that they have is not the same as the parents. The end result is the same, but the buy-in is not the same.
Right.
And so that's hugely important. I want to talk about that in a second, but go to verbally best y'all can translate these jumps into sport. We've done it some with the basketball, a little bit of lacrosse, but like that especially that last one, single leg hop and stick.
Yeah.
Translating it into sport. Ready, set, go.
Right. You want me to take it or you?
You can start, Charlie.
Okay. Yeah. So single leg hop and stick. I mean, again, a lot of these are carry over to sprinting, but obviously, I mean, landing on one foot, to the next, and I mean, sometimes in sport, you got a movement that you're not prepared for, right?
Right.
And that's a lot of times where injuries happen, is where you're running and then something comes out of nowhere, whether that be a player or a hockey stick or something, and hits you, and so you're not prepared for that, and you stumble. You got to be prepared to catch yourself. So I think just in general, like contact prep and getting somebody ready to be able to quickly transition their center mass and land on a foot is crucial and extremely valuable. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, obviously running, sprinting, falling, I think there's a lot of carryover there.
Something that came up for me while you were talking about that though is tennis. That's a lifetime activity too. So that now we're not just looking at young athletes, we're looking at lifetime.
Right.
But think about tennis all the time. You're constantly changing directions. You don't know where that ball is going, and you're removing that center of mass everywhere. You got to be ready to land on one foot and then rotate your body to hit the ball.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Well, think about how much explosion is involved in tennis. Most people don't think of jumping. Every once in a while, Sports Center ends up with a fantastic top 10 clip of a tennis player jumping up for a shot or something, but it's not that. It's the standstill to explosion. Most people are talking about training in this. And that's a great example in the old adage about you don't play tennis to get in shape. You get in shape to play tennis, and this is why. Also, on that note, pickleball.
Right.
Yep.
It's blowing up.
It is. A lot of pickleball players here.
Same idea. But I can't think of any sport that we see typically down here. You got your quote unquote big four for that matter. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer, and then lacrosse. All of those translate into these and easily translate into these 5 jobs. So, but what we were talking about a minute ago is that motivation. We work with so many athletes off season. In preseason.
Yeah.
And so I know when I'm racing, it's best for me to have races scheduled like every 30 days or whatever because they're motivation. I'm like, oh gosh, man, if I'd done this, that, and the other, I could have placed a little higher, and it's motivating. When you're in preseason, when you're in off season, you lack that motivation. It's hard to keep that drive there.
Right.
But that's how you use these metrics, correct?
Right. So we keep every number that we track in a Google Sheet. And what we've done is we've created an athlete dashboard that tracks all these jumps. And so at the end of each month, we print off the dashboard, and then we hand it to them and say, all right, this is your report card.
For real.
Go home and put it on the fridge and show mom and dad. But seriously, though, it's something that they can be proud of, right? They can look at from the month before and how they've progressed. And then also we can say, hey, look, like, we stayed the same here in this area, so we need to try to focus on this a little more in your programming. And so it's been something really cool because it's like, something that we've addressed in the podcast before is when you're dealing with younger athletes, how do you teach them intent? Right. How do you teach them how to give max effort? Because that's something that as an athlete, as you continue to get more advanced, like you've got to be able to give full effort, right? And so like, how do you teach someone to do that? And it's by giving them incentive to do it. And through this, we found a great success. And like, all right, we're not only competing against yourself because we track your previous jumps, but also you're competing against all the other athletes at Personal Edge. So you see a graph that shows, all right, how do I compare to the other athletes here in this specific jump? And so it gives immediate feedback so that they can easily digest it, understand, okay, this is where I'm improving, and this is where I need to make some more improvements. And then it's even more beneficial when they see it translate onto the field. And I'm sure you saw that when training in the weight room and how that translated onto the court. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we've seen several athletes come back and tell Katie and I or any of our trainers here and just say, hey, like, I did this today at school in the weight room. I did this today in my sport. And, it's a super cool thing to hear, whenever they come back to us and say, hey, like, this is how Personal Edge has helped me. I've seen the fruit of my hard work pay off in my sport or at my school. And that's what makes it all worth it, right? To be able to play a role in that.
Well, think of also what we're instilling at that age. Now, this is something I've pushed before, and I've said many times on the podcast that actually PE came before personal edge did. And I wanted to name the place PE because physical education. We need that at an early age, and we need it all through life. And too many times people are going through high school until they finally could get themselves out of PE or varsity sport. Then once that was over, either in college or beforehand, they took a break, and then, oh my gosh, now I got to get back in shape, and you start this ridiculous thought process. Oh, I can't do it now because I'm older than I was, and all this ridiculous stuff. But think of how you're instilling that at a young age. They're seeing how this improves my life, because life to them at that time is sport. This improves my life by doing this. They start seeing the direct effect of it, and start to ingrain in them. As I tell every parent that comes here, hey, look, I hope your child becomes a D1 athlete with a full ride. Add to our list of 23 athletes we have that have a scholarship. But more importantly, I want them to be able to stay fit for life.
One of my favorite clients came in, had never exercised before besides, gym class, physical education.
Yeah.
And so it was super important to build that foundation where she wanted to be here. She wanted to come in, and that's what we do, is we build that loving relationship towards exercise and physical education.
Absolutely.
It's important.
Yeah,
right.
I don't mean to belabor that. In fact, I probably know a podcast on it, but I had a senior client that the question I had for so long is, so many of them that knew they needed to be here, knew where we were, could come down here, knew me personally, knew one of our staff members, but took forever to get here. And I actually interviewed some of them and found out that their only relationship thought process to this was a high school coach. And this particular individual told me, and my high school coaches were bullies.
It takes one bad experience for them to never want to do it again in life.
Yeah.
Period.
It's so important to start a good foundation.
Right. Well, let's jump back. You see what I did there? Jump back to what we were talking about, though. But summing it all up about using those different jumps, measuring them, and, of course, translating them to sport.
Yeah, so like I said, we use the KPI dashboard, and that is kind of where we run all of our jumps through. So we test them each time they come in. They have a daily test, and so they do their warm up. We go through the daily test, we track the number, and then we input it into the spreadsheet. And then, like I said, they go through their program, and then as we we're looking at it each month to see, all right, how have they improved? How have they, where are some areas that they haven't improved? And then we modify the program based off of that. And so, depending on what stage they're in, if they're in more of the high school elite stage, because that's where we mainly do the jump testing. Right. That's where we get into more power focused training, and whether or not they're more of a strength focused athlete or more of a power focused athlete. Sure. And that's kind of how we determine our programming. Yeah. And that using the variety of jumps, most people would think in a particular sport, basketball, all we're going to do is work is vertical. But you've got a client that's coming in for volleyball, and vertical is what they're asking, but that's not the only thing you're going to be training.
Absolutely not.
I'm sure
it's so important to get that lateral stuff in there too.
Right. Using every aspect of it to improve their game. Obviously. So thank y'all. I appreciate y'all coming on here and talking more in depth about this. There's so much more to it. Like I said at the beginning when we first did plyometrics, I said when you say plyometrics, you say a lot. When you say jumps, obviously say a lot. So appreciate y'all joining us today. And also let me let you know how to get in touch with us. If you have any questions about this podcast or any others, or any questions about dealing with dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness, please reach out to us, area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. Make it easy for you. Looking for this lady over here, it's Katie, Katie, at personaledgefitness.com. And, of course, our exercise coordinator, Charlie at personaledgefitness.com. So that's our website, Facebook page. Hit us up on Twitter or X at Team PE to cover this or any others. Jump training, it's not just jumping up and down anymore. It's a lot more to it than that. And it's one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.